Alright, so I've been sitting in my buddy Jason's apartment for the last 2 days trying to process WTF just happened to my life. I've barely slept, and I'm still so F***king livid that my hands are shaking typing this. Some background. My grandma Rose basically raised me. My parents were always more interested in get-rich-quick schemes than actual parenting, and they moved us around constantly chasing the next opportunity. Every summer I'd stay with Grandma Rose at her little house in Oakwood Hills. It wasn't fancy, just a small 3-bedroom with this amazing garden she took care of, but it was the only place that ever felt like home. Grandma and my parents didn't get along at all. They were always fighting about money, my parents constantly asking to borrow some, and Grandma refusing because she knew they'd blow it. This created this weird tension where my parents would talk shit about her behind her back but act sweet to her face. It was gross. When Grandma got sick last year, I was the one who moved in to take care of her. Not my parents, not my sister Isabella, who's basically my mom's mini-me, Maine. I spent 6 months helping her with everything while working remotely. My parents visited like twice, and both times they started fights about her will. They didn't even try to hide it. After she passed, we all met with her lawyer. This is where things got wild. Grandma left her house only to me. She left my parents and sister some money, $25K each. But the house, worth about $280K, was mine alone. The lawyer explained that Grandma specifically wrote in her will that she was leaving me the house because I was the only one who valued it for what it was, not what it was worth. My parents lost their shit right there in the lawyer's office. My dad knocked over a chair and my mom started screaming about how I'd manipulated a sick old woman. I decided to wait for things to cool down before figuring out what to do with the house. I moved into my apartment and continued my life thinking they'd eventually accept it. Big mistake. Last month I got a call from a neighbor asking why there were people clearing out Grandma's house. I rushed over and found a moving company emptying the place. When I confronted them, they showed me paperwork saying the house had been sold. I called the lawyer immediately, who was just as shocked as I was. Turns out my parents somehow forged documents making it look like Grandma had changed her will before dying. They faked my signature on transfer papers and sold the house to some developer. The lawyer was furious and said we had a solid case for fraud, but that would take time. I confronted my parents that night. That's when I found out they'd lost everything in some crypto scam called Moonrocket, or some bullshit. They'd sold Grandma's house for $265K and invested all of it, convinced they'd triple their money in a month. Instead, the whole thing collapsed 3 weeks later. They lost it all. Here's where it gets even crazier. Grandma had also left me $200K in a separate account they didn't know about. When they found out, my sister snooped through my mail, they demanded I give it to them to make things right. They kept saying it was what Grandma would have wanted, and that family takes care of family. Are you **king kidding me? They stole my house, lost all the money, and now wanted my inheritance too? I told them they were lucky I wasn't calling the cops right then and there. My mom started crying those fake-ass tears she uses to manipulate people, and my dad got in my face saying I owed them for raising me. I laughed in his face and walked out. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Yesterday, I came home from work to find a crowd in my apartment complex parking lot. As I got closer, I realized what was happening. All my stuff was piled in the middle, on fire. My parents had somehow convinced the building manager they were moving me out, probably using those same forging skills, and got into my apartment. But this wasn't just destruction, it was a calculated public execution. My mom had posted on the building's Facebook group, "Come see what happens to sons who abandon their parents." My dad had set up actual lights, like it was some kind of sick performance. My sister was live on Instagram saying, "Watch my selfish brother get what he deserves." 300 viewers and counting. My mom was literally pouring gasoline on my belongings while playing to the crowd. This boy got $200K while we're living in our car. Tell me, is that fair? And the neighbors, people I've lived next to for 2 years, were shouting no. My dad was throwing my laptop into the fire, his voice cracking for maximum effect. We haven't eaten in 3 days while he sits on Grandma's fortune. Someone in the crowd actually yelled, "What a bastard!" My sister was tossing my clothes in one by one, fake tears streaming. Grandma would be disgusted. She wanted us all taken care of. The crowd actually applauded. Mrs. Newman from 3B was literally live tweeting the whole thing. Most heartless son in history. These people had no idea what really happened. They just accepted my family's bullshit story without question. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't give them the reaction they wanted. I just smiled, took out my phone, and recorded everything. I memorized every face in that crowd. Then I turned and walked away while my sister screamed that I was a coward. That's when I started orchestrating my revenge. I'm not just going to walk away from this. They crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. They stole from me, destroyed my belongings, and tried to destroy my reputation. Now they're going to learn exactly what happens when you push someone too far. By 3 a.m. this morning, my phone was having a nuclear meltdown. 247 missed calls, 189 texts. Apparently, my family wasn't expecting me to have evidence of their forgery, the crypto scam, and the arson all ready to go. But that's a story for another update. Right now, I need to figure out my next move. I'll post an update when I can. Right now, I'm still trying to process how my own family could do this to me. Update 1. Holy shit, guys, the response to my last post was insane. I didn't expect so many people to care about my fucked up family situation. Thanks for all the advice and support. So I've been staying at my buddy Jason's place since the parking lot bonfire. I literally had nothing left except my phone, wallet, and the clothes I was wearing to work that day. Jason's been solid through all this, letting me crash on his couch, lending me clothes, and not asking too many questions when I spend hours making phone calls or pacing around his living room at 2 a.m. The morning after the fire, I woke up to even more texts from my family. My mom sent this long paragraph about how I drove them to this point by being selfish just like Grandma Rose. According to her twisted logic, the house was supposed to be their retirement plan, and Grandma Rose only left it to me to punish them for borrowing money over the years. She even had the nerve to say that by not giving them my inheritance, I was destroying the family. My dad's texts were just straight-up threats about what happens to ungrateful sons and how I'd regret turning my back on family. Isabella kept sending voice messages where she was half crying, half screaming about how I was making mom sick with stress and how they'd been living in their Subaru for 2 weeks. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I called Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Brennan. He agreed to meet me that same day, and when I showed him the video of my stuff being burned and explained the whole situation, he was legit speechless for like a full minute. Then he started making calls. Turns out the forgery my parents used was actually pretty amateur. They'd gotten some papers notarized using fake IDs, but they messed up some of the legal language and dates. Mr. Brennan said we had a solid case not just for forgery and fraud, but also for the theft and destruction of my property. While at the lawyer's office, I got a text from a coworker saying my parents were at my workplace looking for me. They were telling everyone that I'd stolen their retirement money and abandoned them. My boss texted me asking what the hell was going on. I had to call him and explain everything, and thankfully he believed me. But he said I should take a few days off until things cooled down. That afternoon, I decided to do some digging into my parents' financial history. I knew their passwords for a couple of accounts. They used to have me help with online banking when they couldn't figure it out. So I logged in just to see what they'd been up to. That's when I discovered this wasn't their first rodeo with sketchy investments. They'd been taking out loans and maxing credit cards for years, jumping from one scheme to another, some MLM makeup thing, then a real estate investing course, then some weird timeshare deal, and finally this crypto bullshit. But the really messed up part? I found old emails showing they'd been planning to sell Grandma's house even before she died. They were literally researching how to contest wills and transfer property while she was still alive. They knew exactly what they were doing. I took screenshots of everything and added it to the evidence file I was building. Then I had an idea. Remember all those neighbors who stood around watching my stuff burn? The ones who believed my parents' sob story about me abandoning them? I decided they needed to know the truth. I created a simple document with copies of the forged papers, screenshots of the financial records showing where the money actually went, and photos of me taking care of Grandma during her final months, which my parents were notably absent for. I printed out 20 copies, and at around 6 a.m. the next morning, I slid one under the door of every apartment whose resident I recognized from the fire. I also included Mr. Brennan's contact info in case anyone wanted to verify my story. By noon, the building's group chat was exploding. Mrs. Newman, the same one who'd been live tweeting my humiliation, posted a long apology. Others were tagging my sister's Instagram asking why she lied. Some people were even posting about seeing my parents' car parked outside the building multiple times in the weeks before the incident, which made me realize they'd been scoping the place out, planning the whole thing. That afternoon, Isabella showed up at Jason's apartment. Jason texted me while I was out getting a cheap replacement phone, warning me she was there making a scene. I rushed back to find her sobbing in the hallway outside his door. When she saw me, she switched from sad to angry in about half a second. She started yelling about how I'd ruined everything, how the neighbors were now threatening to report mom and dad to the police, how they might go to jail because of me. I asked her why she went along with burning my stuff, and she said they told her I was going to let them be homeless. that I was hoarding Grandma's money while they suffered. I showed her the emails proving they'd planned to steal the house all along. Her face changed. I could see she was genuinely shocked. For a second, I thought maybe she really hadn't known the whole story, but then she switched tactics, saying that regardless of how they got the money, they needed it more than I did. She started listing all these times they'd supported her, paying for her car, her phone, her spring break trips, while I'd been Grandma's favorite, getting special treatment. I realized then that Isabella wasn't just manipulated by them, she was becoming them. The entitlement, the manipulation, the victim complex. She'd learned from the best. When I wouldn't budge, she tried to push past me into Jason's apartment, saying she needed to use the bathroom. Jason blocked the doorway and told her to leave. She tried to slap him, but I caught her wrist. She screamed that I was hurting her, I wasn't, and stormed off threatening to call the cops on me. 2 hours later, my parents showed up. They started pounding on Jason's door, yelling that I'd assaulted Isabella. Jason's neighbor called security, who came up and escorted them out of the building. They were still screaming as the guard walked them to their car, telling anyone who would listen that I was abusing my sister and stealing from my family. The next day, I filed for an emergency restraining order against all three of them. The judge granted it based on the evidence of harassment and the video of them destroying my property. Mr. Brennan also filed the initial paperwork to sue them for the value of the house plus damages. I thought that would give me some breathing room, but I was wrong. This morning I got an alert from my bank about suspicious login attempts on my account. Someone had tried to reset my password 8 times overnight. The IP address matched my parents' phone provider. They were literally trying to hack my bank account. I immediately called the bank and locked everything down with extra security. That's when the banker mentioned something that made my blood run cold. There had been a wire transfer request submitted 2 days ago for the exact amount of my inheritance. It had been flagged as suspicious and declined, but if the bank hadn't been so careful, my entire $200K would be gone. The request had come with a power of attorney document giving my dad access to my accounts. A forged power of attorney document with my signature on it. They're not just trying to manipulate me anymore. They're actively trying to steal from me. Again, I'm meeting with Mr. Brennan tomorrow to add this to our case. I've also contacted the local police to file a report about the attempted banking fraud. I don't know what my parents' next move will be, but I know they're getting desperate, and desperate people do crazy shit. I'll update again when I have more info. Right now, I need to focus on keeping what's left of my life secure while building a case that will finally make them face consequences for everything they've done. Update 2. First off, thank you to everyone who's been following this shit show and offering advice. The last 2 weeks have been absolute chaos, and TBH, I've barely had time to process everything that's happened. After my parents tried to hack my bank account, I basically went nuclear. No more Mr. Nice Guy. I'd been holding back because, well, they're still my parents. But that restraint is gone now. The morning after discovering the bank hack attempt, I got a weird call from my mom's brother, Uncle Dave. He never calls me, ever. Turns out my parents had been reaching out to the entire extended family, telling them I was having a mental breakdown and had stolen their retirement money. Uncle Dave was calling to check if I was okay and to see if I needed help. I spent almost an hour explaining the actual situation to him, the forged documents, the crypto scam, the burning of my stuff, all of it. At first, he was skeptical, which is fair, I guess, but then I emailed him copies of everything while we were still on the phone. The police report for the property destruction, the restraining order, the bank records showing the attempted fraud, the lawyer's documentation of the forged house sale. His tone completely changed. He went quiet for a bit, then told me something I didn't know. Apparently, my parents had pulled similar stunts with his parents, my other grandparents, years ago. They'd borrowed money for investments that never materialized, and eventually my grandparents had cut them off. That's why there was always tension at family gatherings. Uncle Dave said he wasn't surprised they'd escalated to actual fraud. They'd been heading in that direction for years. By the end of the call, he promised to set the record straight with the rest of the family, and he did. Within days, my parents' support system crumbled. My mom's sister, Jill, called me in tears, apologizing for believing them. My dad's brother, George, sent me money to help replace some of my destroyed belongings. Even my grandparents on my dad's side, who I rarely talk to, sent me a card saying they were there for me if I needed anything. While all this was happening, I was working with Mr. Brennan to move forward with the legal proceedings. We filed formal charges for the forgery, fraud, theft, and destruction of property. The police investigation was moving slowly, but Mr. Brennan pushed for action given the restraining order violations and the attempted bank fraud. Then Isabella showed up at my work. I was in the middle of a meeting when the receptionist messaged me saying my sister was in the lobby, causing a scene. I excused myself and found Isabella crying at the front desk, mascara running down her face. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw me, she immediately started talking about how she had proof I was lying about everything, and she was going to ruin me if I didn't drop the charges against our parents. I asked her what proof she was talking about, and she pulled out her phone to show me a video. It was from last Christmas, when I was at my parents' house. In the video, I'm talking to my grandma about how I'm going to help her organize her finances and make sure everything's taken care of. Isabella said this proved I had manipulated Grandma Rose into changing her will. I literally laughed in her face. The video actually showed me helping Grandma, which is exactly what I'd been saying all along. Plus, the date on the video was months after Grandma had already finalized her will with Mr. Brennan. The blackmail attempt was so pathetic it was almost sad. I told Isabella she needed to leave before I called security. She refused, so I pulled out my phone and showed her I was one tap away from calling the police for violating the restraining order. She turned pale and left, but not before saying this wasn't over. That night, Jason texted me a screenshot from Isabella's Instagram story. She'd posted a picture of me from years ago with the caption, "My brother thinks he's so perfect. Wait until everyone sees what he really is." I reported the post for harassment and blocked her on all platforms. The next day, I received an email from Mr. Brennan that made my jaw drop. During the investigation, they'd discovered my parents had a second bank account they'd hidden from everyone, including the court. They'd transferred $35,000 from the house sale to this account before investing the rest in crypto. They still had money while claiming to be homeless and starving. This discovery changed everything. Mr. Brennan immediately filed an emergency motion for financial disclosure, which the judge granted. My parents were ordered to reveal all their assets within 48 hours or face contempt charges. They ignored the order. So what happened next? The judge issued a bench warrant for their arrest. They were taken into custody that evening and held until they agreed to comply with the financial disclosure. Turns out, they not only had the $35,000 hidden away, but also a vacation timeshare in Florida they'd purchased years ago that they never told anyone about. They weren't living in their car. They'd been staying at an extended stay hotel using the hidden money. After they were released, they still had to face the consequences of their actions. The court froze their assets pending the outcome of our case. Without access to their secret funds, they were actually in the financial position they'd been pretending to be in. That's when they got desperate. 3 days ago, I was leaving work when I spotted their Subaru in the parking lot. I immediately called the police to report the restraining order violation, but before they arrived, my parents approached me with their hands up, saying they just wanted to talk. My dad looked like shit. Unshaven, bags under his eyes, wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in at the apartment fire. My mom's usual perfect makeup was missing, her hair unwashed. They started talking about how they'd made a huge mistake, how they'd been desperate, how they never meant for things to go this far. I just stared at them, not saying a word. My dad then pulled out his phone and showed me a GoFundMe page they'd created. The title was, "Help Parents Recover from Ungrateful Son's Financial Abuse." The description was full of lies, claiming I'd manipulated my dying grandmother, stolen their retirement money, and was now using the legal system to punish them for one mistake. They'd raised nearly $7,000 from strangers who believed their bullshit story. I took pictures of the page while they were standing there. Then I calmly told them they were violating the restraining order and the police were on their way. They panicked and ran back to their car, peeling out of the parking lot just as the police cruiser was pulling in. I showed the officers the GoFundMe page and explained the situation. They took a report and promised to add it to the case file. That night, I reported the fundraiser to GoFundMe for fraud, providing documentation of the restraining order and pending legal case. The page was taken down within hours, and according to their policy, all donations were refunded. But I wasn't done. Remember how my parents humiliated me in front of my entire apartment complex? How they turned my neighbors against me with their lies? I decided it was time for some public exposure of my own. I contacted Mrs. Newman. Yes, the same neighbor who had live-tweeted my humiliation. After seeing the evidence I'd distributed, she'd been one of the first to apologize. I asked if she would help me set the record straight with everyone who had witnessed the burning. She agreed immediately. Yesterday evening, Mrs. Newman organized an impromptu gathering in the same parking lot where my belongings had been burned. About 30 residents showed up, many of whom had been present for the original incident. I stood in front of them and calmly explained everything. The forged documents, the stolen house, the crypto scam, the hidden bank accounts, the attempted theft of my inheritance, all of it. I showed them copies of the court documents, the police reports, and the restraining order. As I was speaking, a familiar Subaru pulled into the parking lot. My parents had somehow found out about the gathering, probably through their remaining neighborhood contacts, and showed up to try to defend themselves. They rushed toward the crowd, yelling about how I was lying, how I was the one who had stolen from them. But this time, no one was buying it. Several neighbors stepped between us, forming a barrier. Someone called the police. My dad tried to push through, but two guys from the building stood firm, telling him to back off. My mom started crying, using those same fake tears that had worked so well before, but now everyone could see through it. Mrs. Newman actually told her to save the performance for court. My parents realized they'd lost their audience and retreated to their car, but not before my dad yelled that I would regret this, and that family should stand together. The police arrived minutes later, but my parents had already left. I filed another report for the restraining order violation. With multiple witnesses this time, the officers said there would likely be consequences. This morning, I woke up to texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Apparently, my parents had made one final, desperate attempt to salvage their reputation. They'd sent a mass email to everyone in the family claiming I was mentally ill, that I'd been diagnosed with something called persecutory delusional disorder, and was making up the whole situation. They included a fake doctor's note as proof. The thing is, they sent this to my Uncle Dave too, the same uncle who had all the evidence I'd sent him. He immediately forwarded their email to everyone else in the family, along with copies of the actual court documents, police reports, and financial records. He called out their lies point by point. My phone's been blowing up with family members offering support and sharing their own stories about my parents' dishonesty over the years. Turns out I wasn't the first person they'd tried to scam, just the first one to fight back this hard. Mr. Brennan called an hour ago. The judge has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow regarding the multiple restraining order violations and the fraudulent GoFundMe. He says there's a good chance my parents will face serious consequences this time. I should feel relieved, but honestly, I'm just tired and angry and sad that it had to come to this. But mostly, I'm determined to see this through to the end. They tried to destroy my life. They burned everything I owned. They turned my family and neighbors against me. They tried to steal money that was rightfully mine. I'm not backing down now. Not when I'm finally starting to win. I'll update after the hearing tomorrow. Something tells me my parents have one more desperate move left in them. Final update. So much has happened since my last update that IDK even where to start. The last 3 weeks have been absolutely insane, and I've been going non-stop dealing with everything. But I promised an update after the emergency hearing, so here goes. The morning of the hearing, I woke up to a text from Jason saying there was a package outside his door with my name on it. I was immediately suspicious since nobody was supposed to know I was staying there except a few trusted people. I told him not to touch it and called the non-emergency police line. They sent an officer over who confirmed it wasn't dangerous. Just an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from my dad. 3 pages of the most manipulative bullshit I've ever read. He wrote about how they were desperate parents trying to secure their retirement and how Grandma Rose had promised them the house for years before changing her mind to punish them. He claimed they only sold the house because they thought it was morally theirs, and that I was being cruel and vindictive by pursuing legal action against my own flesh and blood. The letter ended with a thinly veiled threat. If you continue down this path, we'll have no choice but to reveal things about you that would destroy your reputation forever. Classic narcissist. Move. When losing, resort to threats. I brought the letter to the hearing and handed it to Mr. Brennan, who immediately submitted it as evidence of continued harassment. When the judge called us in, I expected to see my parents there with some court-appointed lawyer. Instead, they showed up with this slick-looking attorney in an expensive suit. Later found out they'd borrowed money from one of my dad's poker buddies to hire him. They were still spending money they didn't have. The hearing was intense. Their lawyer tried to paint me as an ungrateful son who was persecuting his poor parents over a misunderstanding. He argued that they truly believed the house was meant for them, that they'd made a mistake with the forgery, but had acted out of desperation, not malice. Then Mr. Brennan presented our evidence. The forged documents, the hidden bank accounts, the violated restraining order, the fraudulent GoFundMe, the mass email with fake medical records, and now the threatening letter. He also called Uncle Dave as a witness, who testified about their history of financial manipulation within the family. My parents' faces when Uncle Dave walked in. My dad actually lunged toward him, calling him a traitor, and had to be restrained by the bailiff. Not a great look in front of the judge. The judge was not impressed with my parents. She called their actions a pattern of fraud, harassment, and intimidation, and said the restraining order violations alone were grounds for serious consequences. She found them in contempt of court and gave them a choice: 30 days in county jail or ankle monitors with strict geographic restrictions for 3 months. They chose the ankle monitors. But that wasn't all. The judge also ordered them to pay restitution for my destroyed property, around $12,000, imposed a $5,000 fine for the fraudulent fundraiser, and referred the forgery case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. She extended the restraining order for 2 years and warned that any further violations would result in immediate jail time. Their fancy lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. My parents sat there in shock. Isabella wasn't at the hearing. Apparently, she'd gotten into a huge fight with my parents the night before and had gone to stay with a friend. I only found this out later. As we were leaving the courthouse, my dad tried to approach me one last time. He was literally crying, saying they'd lose everything, that they'd be homeless for real this time. The bailiff stepped between us before I could respond, which was probably for the best because I was about to tell him exactly where he could shove his crocodile tears. The next day, I got a call from Isabella. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Eventually, I pieced together what happened. After my parents got home from court, they'd completely lost it on her, blaming her for their legal troubles. Apparently, they'd told her to do certain things during this whole mess, like the Instagram live stream and the blackmail attempt, promising it would fix everything. When it didn't work, they turned on her. She admitted something I hadn't known. My parents had convinced her that I'd manipulated Grandma Rose by telling her lies about them, and that's why she left me the house instead of them. Isabella genuinely believed I'd poisoned Grandma against them, and that's why she'd been so angry with me. Finding out my parents had been lying to her too was apparently the last straw. I didn't forgive her on the spot or anything. She still participated in burning my stuff and tried to blackmail me. But I did tell her to talk to Uncle Dave, who could help her understand the full situation. Whether our relationship can be repaired someday, IDK, that's a problem for future me. 2 days after the hearing, Mr. Brennan called with news that blew my mind. The title company that had processed the fraudulent house sale was liable for not properly verifying the documents. They were offering a settlement of $175,000, not the full value of the house, but a significant amount. Combined with my inheritance, I'd have enough to potentially buy another small place of my own. But the real karma came a week later. Remember Mrs. Newman who live-tweeted my humiliation? She approached me in the parking lot one evening as I was grabbing some stuff from Jason's car. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her phone. She told me she felt terrible about what she'd done and wanted to make it right. Turns out she's some kind of micro-influencer in our local area with like 15,000 followers across her social platforms. She offered to post the full, true story with all the evidence I was comfortable sharing. I agreed, and she put together this detailed thread about how my parents had manipulated everyone, complete with court document screenshots with personal info redacted. The post absolutely blew up in our community. Within days, people I didn't even know were messaging me with support. The few neighbors who had still been on my parents' side changed their tune real quick. My parents became local pariahs. My mom even had to quit her book club because no one would speak to her. Then the district attorney's office decided to pursue criminal charges for the forgery and fraud. My parents were looking at potential jail time for real. Their fancy lawyer dropped them when they couldn't pay his retainer for the criminal case, and they got stuck with an overworked public defender instead. Facing actual criminal charges and with no support system left, my parents finally broke. They reached out through their lawyer offering a deal. They would plead guilty to lesser charges, pay full restitution for the house, using their hidden assets and selling the timeshare, and move out of state if I would agree not to testify against them. Mr. Brennan advised me that this was actually a good deal. I'd get most of the house value back, they'd have a criminal record, but likely avoid jail time, and they'd be required to stay away from me as part of their probation. After thinking about it for a few days, I agreed. Last week, they signed the agreement. They had to liquidate everything they owned and take out loans to come up with the money. The timeshare sold for way less than they paid for it. The $35,000 from their hidden account went straight to me. They even had to sell their Subaru and buy some old beater car instead. In total, I got back $245,000 of the $280,000 house value, plus the $12,000 for my destroyed property. Combined with Grandma's $200,000 inheritance, I now have enough to buy a new place outright and still have savings left over. My parents are moving to Arizona next month to live in some cheap rental my dad's cousin found for them. They're basically starting over at age 60 with nothing but debt and a criminal record. Isabella decided not to go with them. She's staying with a friend until she figures out her next move. As for me, I've started looking at houses in a different neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a small place that's mine that no one can take from me. Jason's been helping me house hunt on weekends. Uncle Dave invited me to Thanksgiving this year. The first time in my adult life, I'll be celebrating a holiday without my parents. It feels weird, but also kind of freeing. I'm still angry about everything that happened. I lost my grandmother's house, the one place that felt like home to me. I lost years of photos and mementos that can never be replaced. I lost the family I thought I had. But I refused to let them get away with what they did. I fought back. I exposed their lies. I made them face consequences. And in the end, that feels like the best revenge I could have gotten. My parents spent their entire lives chasing get-rich-quick schemes, manipulating people, and avoiding responsibility for their actions. Now they're broke, disgraced, and alone. They tried to publicly humiliate me and destroy my life. Instead, they destroyed their own. So yeah, that's my update. Thanks to everyone who followed this crazy story and offered advice along the way. Special thanks to the people who told me not to back down when I was wavering. You were right. Some people only learn when they're forced to face consequences. I'm not sure if I'll post any more updates after this. I'm ready to close this chapter and move forward, but I wanted you all to know how it ended. They fucked around, and they absolutely found out.